the public policies. I've prepared a speech. And I think by my own, I could not touch every side, so I'm also looking forward to your contribution. At this moment, the outbreak, it's been 10 years after the outbreak of the 2008 financial crisis. We should look at the financial researches and economic researches, as well as the elaboration of the policies. What are the progresses? And what are the future improvements? First of all, just after the outbreak of the financial crisis, the financial circle and the economic circle have assembled the conferences to discuss about the problematics. And by the end of 2008, we have started to talk about the pro-cyclical problems, and we have suggested counter-cyclical measures. And we have decided to put up the macro-prudential policies. On the basis of that, for the CFIs, we have increased the demand for a counter-cyclical measures in 2014 during the G20 summit. We have introduced ELAC, another set of measures, in order to strengthen the counter-cyclical character of the system. We have studied the measures to enhance the stability of the system. We have introduced many different models of experiences and practices. It's very relevant to talk about this topic at Tsinghua University because we are very strong at interdisciplinary studies. One of the disciplines is the theory of control. We need to study the stability of the system, the capacity of feedback of the system, and how can we decide the control of the changing element, and also the disturb of the other elements. Today we have a system studying not only the theory of the control, but also the communication, covering not only human beings, but also animals and other living entities. And one important thing is to study the feedback system. Another is the electronic engineering. Electronic engineering is specialized at the studying of the feedback system. Why am I coming up with these three disciplines? Because after the outbreak of the 2008 financial crisis, the key discussions in the world have involved these three subjects, these three disciplines. At BIS, IMF, and other occasions of discussions, we have approached, first of all, the outbreak of the financial crisis are related to the financial market products, including some niche products and derivatives. They are detached from the financial activities, and they are not serving the financial market. That's why there's a tendency for them to experience a lot of fluctuations. And secondly, the feedback capacity of the government. When the market is good, then the stock performance is good, and everything is good. Once there is a problem, then everything is on the downturn. This is an active reaction. Later, some scholars and officials have made relevant presentations and written articles mentioning the correction of the over positive actions in the market. And they have proposed that we should introduce more negative feedbacks, negative interactions. After that, there's another problem coming up. Not all the experts are familiar with the three above-mentioned disciplines. They don't know what are the positive and negative actions. And some people think that all the things that are positive are good things. It's like today we are talking about the positive energy and positive attitude we think is a good thing. In 2009, the BIS, end of spring and the beginning of summer, has proposed another term for that. Counter-cyclicality is an important thing to be introduced. The most important thing is to introduce the cushion for the capital and to reduce the dependence on the noting organizations. And everything we do is to reduce the pro-cyclical actions and to introduce more counter-cyclical measures. After talking about all these measures for the counter-cyclicality in the system, people have seen the situation improved because the terms are easier for them to understand. However, still our policies have not yet covered each corner. At this moment of the 10th anniversary of the outbreak of 2008 financial crisis, I think we can do some more things. For the cybernetics and electronic engineering, the systematic stability is a very complex subject. We have more comprehensive measures for that. The system is a complete one. A big system is composed of several subsystems. For each subsystem, there may be different channels of feedbacks. They may be positive feedbacks or negative feedbacks. It's not necessary that we wait until the final system to give us the feedback. We can already start to give the feedbacks since the steps, since the stage of the subsystems. For the feedback loops, some of them are positive ones, and some others hold a character of negative character. And we put them together, there's another result. And for the final result, it still requires a lot of calculations and consideration. And in our financial system, it's hard to think in this way. And at the end, for the counter-cyclical regulation, it would be excessively focused on the capital cushion. Apart from that, for the electronic engineering, the feedback loops cover another range, that's the range of the time. For example, the frequency. At a certain frequency, a feedback may be negative and is a good thing for the system. And at another frequency, it may become, to the contrary, a positive feedback. And from the point of view of the regulators, we should also consider the mathematic character of the feedbacks. For example, the differential character. You need to be quick. And sometimes you can even go beyond a little bit the boundary. On November 2008, we have already published the first document. We have moved fast. It's the differential policy, differential character. However, in other cases, we need integral character. This one is more reliable, but it has also a problem. It's lagging behind, it's less fast. And the circuit breaker, we are using that. And some people think that it's like the fuse. It's like the fuse protector. When there's too much power in the system, then the circuit would be cut due to the fuse protector. However, in our system, we can just cut off a certain loop for the feedback. If the system is lack of stability and is due to the problem or the role of some positive feedback, then we can adjust this single loop. We can take it off for a period of time, and when the whole system is stabilized, then it's okay. So it's a periodic taking off, detachment of the positive feedback loop. When we were dealing with these financial crises, we have studied a lot for these kind of measures. Different disciplines have applied different measures, and the studies could go on and on. And second, by this opportunity, I'd like to share with you some other things. We should consider more the consecutive function. When we look at the regulations of the financial system, it's black or white. And we also have different scenario-based measures. In few cases, we are using the consecutive function. I could give you an example. If it's something that is calculable, we can use the consecutive function. For example, according to the Basel descent, but sometimes we are stuck with this black or white measure, 0 or 1. We have held numerous sessions of conferences and spent a lot of time and energy to argue whether it's black or white, whether it's 0 or 1. I think in that point we could make more improvements. I give you an example. First, for the important financial institutions across the globe, we started with the banks. After the financial crisis, people were angry because the governments were saving the institutes that are too big to fail while using the tax contributions from the citizens. For the governments, we need to save the too big to fail institutions. However, it's much more important to save these institutions than the other smaller institutions. That's why we need to do everything possible to prevent this kind of risk. And for the GFIS, we need to have the threshold. And on both sides of the line, the threshold, there's the cliff effect. I still remember that by that moment, the ICBC was very reluctant to join the GFIS. Because once you are in, you are under much stricter regulations, and you need to apply to a higher standards. And today, the four major banks in China are in the GFIS, the ICBC, ABC, BOC, and CCB. We have also talking a lot about the effectiveness of the GFIS. There could be also another one, the DCFIS, the domestic CFIS. The major financial institutions and banks in the domestic market. If we are focused in the DCFIS, then we will leave the Basel and the Global Stability Forum aside. However, we think that the DCFIS is not sufficient. Sometimes we are only relying on the subjective opinions of the experts. We also need some more objective criteria. We want to know when there's an event, whether it's highly relevant to the global market or the other way. That's why it's important to join the GCFIS. I've given to you this example to show the importance of the consecutive function. If we could apply the consecutive function, then the things could be easier. We don't need to think that there are 30 most important institutions, and starting by the 31st is less important. Instead, we have the importance index. It could be 1, it could be 0, 99, 0.98, etc. And we have adapted requirements, for example, the automatic cushion. For smaller countries, we cared about them less. Sometimes in those smaller countries, they only have a few, 1 or 2 very big banks, and apart from that, no other important organizations of the financial regulations and activities. And for us in China, it's totally different. Apart from the 4 major commercial banks, we have the policy banks. it's easier to use the consecutive functions for the Chinese situation because all the banks, the institutions, they are connected, interconnected. For the banking system and financial system, they are responding to the effect of the financial crisis. They are also making measures to defend the outbreak of the next session of financial crisis. There is the framework submitted during the G20 summit, but it's not yet decided. We have only achieved consensus on the majority parts of the contents. For the execution timetable, should it be quicker or slower? I think it's related to the recovery speed of the whole world, and also the Basel. At Basel II, we have stressed the internal rating model of the banks to rate the companies instead of using too much the external rating organizations. However, another problem with the internal one, there is a great risk of internal manipulation. For example, the standard evaluation method of the risk. And for the output of the internal rating system, we have a bottom line setting. We have discussed over this for 2 or 3 years, and until last year, finally, after rounds of discussions, we have set it between 70% to 75% as the baseline. Finally, we have set it to 72.5%. For the other people, they may not understand. From 2011 to 2017, what are the things you are talking about during all those rounds of discussions at Basel? Actually, in some countries, the housing loans are supported, guaranteed by the government, and in some other countries, it's not the case. In some countries, they have a different rating criteria for the sovereignty loan. We think it's important to apply the function and the consecutive function method. It's more effective, and it would help us to save a lot of energy. For the financial regulation, the indicators, to some extent, are the examples of the rule of law we have learned from the legislative system. In a few words, the law system tells us what we can do and what we cannot do. They set the standards. They set the boundary in a very clear way. You cannot step outside of the boundary. Otherwise, you will be punished. For the lawmaking and for the elaboration of the financial regulation policies, it's easier to do it in a black or white manner or in a steps-up manner, and it's more difficult to do it in a consecutive function manner. However, I think the consecutive function is a better method. In the financial market, as we have talked about before, the GCFIS, the majority of the data are calculable. We can use the weighted method and use the opinions of the experts. For the GCFIS, the total assets and the total revenue, those are the calculable elements. And for those other elements more difficult to calculate, like the activeness degree in the international community, then you can add up from different columns of performances. And then the results should also go through the test of the time. People's minds are changing all the time. And in a regular way, we should correct or adjust the standard weighted results. First, the People's Bank of China has joined the GCFIS, and then the ABC, ICBC, and BOC have also joined. When we are fighting back the negative impact of the financial crisis, and when we were taking measures to address the results of the financial crisis, we have came to some compromises. The IMF during its 14th round of evaluation of quotas, it's finished by 2011. It is said that for the emerging countries, we should give them a higher proportion. For example, for China's quota should be raised to 6.9%, and to the contrast, the developed countries should see their quotas lowered. In the end, we should come to the compromise. Some bigger countries, they may disagree with them, and they may also seek the judicial solutions. And we have waited for years, and until the year before the last, we have settled the situation down. We can also use the function idea to solve the problem. The weight of the quota, whether it's rational or not, you can do the voting according to the weighted results. If currently you think the quota is not good, then you can wait for the next session, because it's a progressive one. You have seen that during the 14th evaluation, there's a result, and then very fast we pass to the 15th session of evaluation of quotas. And as we can see, it's still hard for the 15th session to have a final say on the quota. We could not have a big leap forward to the outcomes. As a result, this situation asks us to use more integrated solutions. to learn to compromise, to have the other measures. And this year we have participated in a lot of forums and conferences to think what are the lessons we can draw from the past economic financial crisis. For the traditional economics, we have written a lot of articles. We are focusing on a single changing element from A to B and from B to C. With the outbreak of the financial crisis, people say that it's due to the broken bubbles of the Nasdaq and then the Enron, and also the 9/11 event. People have applied a very ease policy for a very long period of time. And some other people say that it's due to the launching of the housing loans from some small size of economic institutions. Once the loans are sold, they will leave it aside and never care about that anymore. These kind of opinions have only stressed only one logic lines, only one relation of reasons and results. Actually, there are a lot of changing elements. Only one changing element would not make this situation. For our model analysis, it should be comprehensive one. The vectors we use for this model are usually in the same nature. For example, when a lot of changing elements share the same nature, then we would write them into the vectors, describe them as vectors. And also the matrix description. But this vector will not apply to the changing elements with different natures. And for most of the models of studies, they are describing the static models. However, when there's a crisis, it's made due to some events of very small possibility. For example, the big tail effect. And from the point of view of the probability, it's usually hard to tell the deep-rooted relations, and then we say that it's a very small probability event. In the traditional thinking method and in the traditional description method, to analyze the global financial crisis, usually we cannot give sufficient explanations. In conferences, you can tell that the person A is talking about something and the person B is talking about a totally different thing. And for the next round of financial crisis, you still cannot come up with a real good solution. I think that we should also consider the importance of making a series of same nature or similar nature changing elements into vectors. In China, we have used the conditional probability. We don't consider the small probability as unknown events. Instead, we should describe under different circumstances the small probabilities events. What are the reasons for those events? And when there's several small probability events, whether later it would be a more probable event. And for the leverage rate, people say when it's too high, it may bring us bad news. And in some countries, somewhere the leverage rate is higher and there's no bad news. So it means that the high rate of leverage should be connected to another variable, and together it would be a dangerous thing. So in this case, you can understand a single variable will not definitely make the things worse. And also the outflow of the capital. People are talking about it in these days for Argentina. What will be its future destiny? Will it go back to its past experience? Will it repeat the sad story? For Argentina, there's the problem of the debt and also for the outflow of the capital. And thirdly, it has the domestic affairs, domestic problems. However, can we say that only a single variable caused this situation? Is the outflow of capital of Argentina caused by the increase in the interest rate with the U.S.? People are familiar with the song "Don't Cry for Argentina." I really hope that, with fingers crossed, that Argentina will not repeat the sad story in this case. And over the past 10 years after the outbreak of the financial crisis, we have discussed a lot for the things that we can improve in the future, and also the methods of policy elaboration and the lessons we can draw from the past so that we will not suffer from that again, and we can improve our strength and capabilities. There are lots of interesting topics for studies and also for thesis. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Zhou行长的精彩演讲。下面有请中国银行保险监督管理委员会。
Okay, well, you're hearing a speech by China's former central bank governor Zhou Xiaochuan at the Udalco Global Financial Forum in Tsinghua University in Beijing, and it's very unique because you can't hear such a speech elsewhere because it's a very academic one. Because we know that the Udalco Financial School is one of the best financial school in China, and Mr. Zhou is sharing his experience with a lot of teachers and students about his experiences in steering China's monetary policy during from 2002 to 2018, especially after the 2008 financial crisis, and he shared the China's methods in dealing with this crisis. And we know that Governor Zhou published several academic papers about that, about China's approach to dealing the external shocks of financial crisis after 2008. And it is his unique personal style. And we noticed that some friends posted comments on our social platform that is difficult to understand, and he or she would rather to hear it in Chinese. And I assure you that it is also very difficult to understand in Chinese either. And he used a lot of technical terms as he did in the past. and those include a lot of matrix, a lot of equations, and a lot of mathematical models. And especially he mentioned the counter-cyclical approach in dealing with the financial crisis, and that means the common approach by central banks around the world using ultra-easy monetary policies to deal with the economic contraction. And however, we know that China successfully avoided the shocks of financial crisis, but there are still lessons being learned, because we know that ultra-easy monetary policies pushed up equity prices around the world, and it's very addictive, and many countries are still feeling the pinch of those policies. Although the global financial crisis is 10 years ago, but the experience that's shared by the former central bank governor Zhou Xiaochuan is still valuable nowadays, because today the world is still very vulnerable to financial risks. We're seeing rising debt levels in China and also many other countries, and we're also seeing financial crisis in Argentina, and Governor Zhou mentioned the issue as well. And the key task for central banks around the world is to prevent systematic risks that did in 2008 and maintain financial stability. And to give you more context of this financial forum, it's a 2-day forum in Beijing. And besides this, after this speech by Governor Zhou, and there were also other keynote speakers, including former IMF Deputy Governor Mr. Zhu Ming, as well as Central Bank Governor from Hungary. So a lot to look forward to, and we'll keep you posted on the latest development and news here. And please keep following us on our city10.com and our social media platforms. And I'm Wenxin reporting from the Udao Global Financial Forum. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.